Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we are going to be talking about data and artificial intelligence. But more importantly, we're going to reset the table. When it comes to business of data and artificial intelligence, where do we go from here? What has been done, but more importantly, what's to come? Where do we start thinking about integrating artificial intelligence, leveraging the data that we've created from our company product or services, and drive business forward into the future with that? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about here today on VCTV. And we've brought together the best and the brightest from around the world to share their thoughts and insights on just this topic, as well as they're all investors within the space and have been for some time and or have been building in the space as well. So if you'd like to be on a show like today and joining our guests as speakers here in just a moment, or as an entrepreneur to pitch your company product or service, reach out to the team and or myself, and we'll find the right spot for you. And speaking of the team, a huge thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day and bringing us all together to share these types of conversations and trends and opportunities with your audience as well. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Let's go ahead and jump right in introducing today's guest. First and foremost, Nicole, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure, as always. A little intro and a little background.
Thank you, Kyle. It's great to be here today. I wear many different hats. I am a CMO on demand and have a strategy firm called Outfront Solutions, where I'm dealing in AI from the standpoint of marketing and AI and data collection and understanding your customers and audiences. And then my other hat that I wear is for the fund How Women Invest. And How Women Invest is disrupting the venture capital landscape by investing in that 2% of female-founded and female-led businesses, many of which are in the AI and data space. So I'm looking forward to having conversations about all of it today.
I love it. Thank you, Nicole. Joanne, welcome back to the show as well. Always a pleasure. A little introduction and a little background.
Sure. Great. So hi, I'm Joanne Hackett. I'm here today representing IQVIA, which for those of you who don't know is a global company, the human data science company, massive amount of intelligence when it comes to data, collecting it, using it, and doing a variety of different things with it. And also the other side of the company, which is helping with clinical trials. So a really nice cross section of intelligence. In my spare time, I'm also an investor. It doesn't always have to be Femtech, but that does tend to be something that I do spend a little bit of time in. So I'm here today to hopefully break down some of those misconceptions about data, AI, where we're going, whether or not it's still trendy and sexy, and how we're going to make the most and the best of the data that we actually have coming out of the infrastructure that we build today.
This is great, Joanne. And there's so much data out there, as we've talked about over the last year now here on VCTV, with what has happened in the world and how all of our lives have changed in the last year. The amount of data that has been created because of the company products and services that we all use and new ones, it's a complete game changer. So again, today's topic is very important of just resetting the table around what all this means and where we go from here. So we'll be back on that. Elfish, welcome back to the show as well, my friend. A little intro and a little background.
Hello, hi, I'm Alpesh Doshi. I'm a technologist by background, worked in data for 15 years, seen the problems and the challenges and the opportunities around the application of data across markets and industries. These days, one of the things I'm doing is building a venture called Kendra Labs, which is to help companies implement a data layer across their business. Because most companies can't afford to build an enterprise-grade data platform or an AI platform. What we're doing is building to provide it in the cloud as a service. And one of the key areas we're working is around sustainability, but also around SMEs and helping SMEs build that data-driven business.
Wonderful. Thank you. Last but not least, Keith, welcome back. Absolute pleasure as always. A little intro and a little background to those who may not know you.
Hey, Kyle. Yeah, it's great to be back here. So I've been in VC for 20 years, but before that, I spent the 90s as an entrepreneur in a series of startups in the software and media space. My work in VC was half in corporate, Mitsubishi and then BASF, and then half in clean tech VC. The interesting thing about the data and AI here is that we're seeing an increasing importance of this across everything, not just in the software space, but in clean tech and in industrial applications. And I don't just mean IoT, I mean across the board. So I guess that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about now. And I'm investing actively in that space now with my new firm, Upper Stage Ventures.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and jump right in and reset this table. And Joanne, I want to kick it off with you. You mentioned in your introduction, there's a ton of misconceptions. Data has always been trendy and it's been used as a buzzword. So has artificial intelligence. I've mentioned on previous episodes about 5 years ago or so, we saw a number of venture funds that just exploded out of nowhere, all focused on AI. And I say that because there was no real thesis as to where artificial intelligence was going to be applied. Come full circle, here we are in 2021. Artificial intelligence is now a conversation on everything. Whether that's trendy or whether that's reality, still to be determined as things are moving forward. But reset the table for us. Where are we really at when it comes to data and artificial intelligence?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's probably highlighted the importance of data and data access is actually our recent pandemic. And this is very, very obvious from around the world that the more data that is accumulated and shared, the better insights that we can get about trends and projections and things like that. So I think for a very long time, we were very focused on thinking it was something that was very personal, or if we gave up something, maybe we were cheating ourselves a little bit, or we weren't entirely sure what was going to be happening with it. I think the nice thing that's happened because of the pandemic is people have realized that there are smart ways to share data. You don't have to give up loads and loads of personal information to share trends, for example, and that there are companies that are actually building in this layer to be able to strip away the identifiable data and actually use some of those trends. So I think that we are moving much more to an acceptance of using data. And now what I think is the exciting part is that there's been these tools and technologies and companies that have been specialists in deriving this data. We're now going to finally see that be put to work. So I'm really excited that a lot of companies that have actually stayed the course, we're going to start to actually realize the benefits of what they've been doing. And so many companies are specialists in understanding the regulations and what it means in different countries, whether or not something is identifiable, whether or not something is considered to be personal. And they've never really taken their foot off the gas. And I think this pandemic has highlighted that deep expertise is actually super important to allow citizens to feel much more comfortable about the concept of looking at data and accessing it and aggregating it. But more importantly, they actually have extreme skills that can actually be pulled into many different sectors. So I think that the resetting is that we're actually finally going to be dusting things off the shelf and using it appropriately, as opposed to beavering away and doing something very differently. So I think it's super cool, very exciting.
And maybe we'll finally have actionable insights, right?
Yeah.
From the wearable space. We've talked about it for years. We're going to be wearing these devices. We're going to have all this data collected on us. And then what? And now finally, as you said, we're starting to see that acceptance layer. And Elpish, I want to come to you real quick on this as well. I mean, you're helping businesses really integrate what you call the data layer into their businesses, because it's something that's not necessarily thought about. Anything to add on to Joanne's comment, but then also how are you seeing this table being reset as you start to talk to companies about it?
Yeah, I think that the hype that you see in the media around AI and data is far away from reality. The actual use of algorithms that if I tell you, I wrote my first deep learning algorithm in 19 something. I won't say which date, but it was before the 2000s started, and that stuff is still available today. But the reality was, in those days, the technology wasn't mature enough to be able to run those models, right? And so a lot of the models and a lot of the technology, a lot of the models are all there. They've been there for a long time. Oops, my phone's ringing. But the challenge is that companies haven't figured out their data. We've been talking about big data for 10+ years, but companies still haven't figured out their data yet. I talk to companies every single day and say, well, have you got your data sorted? No. Like, well, how are you going to do any of this stuff unless you fix the data first? And then the second thing is, what we've seen over the last 10 years is to build an enterprise grade data platform is very expensive. It costs a lot of money. It's a multi-year program of work. and it's pretty complex. Yeah. And most companies have tried this journey. You know, vendors come and say data lakes, and data warehouses, and they've not worked, right? Data lake, show everything in a data lake and it'll solve all your problems. And the reality has been there's lots of these, I hate these cliches, but data swamps. They're now called data swamps, and they really haven't delivered on the promise of, hey, bring your data together and use it. So the other big dynamic that we're seeing is the shift to the cloud and cloud native. So that's a really important part of this, because most enterprises can't build a big enough infrastructure in their own business to house all the data that they've got. They're going to have to shift it to cloud. They've got no choice to it unless it's shifted to cloud. So if you combine cloud and cloud native and combine new types of applications that are built in a different way, and I'm not going to go into technical terms, but it's not about what today's world, which is client server. You have a database and you have an application. It's all shifting to a different type of model. Those things, those pieces together will allow companies to quickly build and integrate data into their business. And so there are some companies out there. So, you know, Ikiva's looking, you know, Ikivia, I can't remember how you pronounce it, you know, looking in healthcare markets, but in every sector, in every market, in every vertical, this platform-based approach, I think, is really going to accelerate those data-driven businesses. And frankly, the ones that don't adapt it are going to die. I mean, it's simple as that, right? Look at the retail massacre in the UK. If you none are in the UK, right? The retailer high street in the UK is gone, right? All the big names have been around for 260 years. They haven't digitized. They haven't done e-commerce. They're dead. And I think any business that thinks that they're going to get away with not digitizing is frankly not going to be in business. I mean, we've already seen in the last year because of the fact that they just, no, we don't need e-commerce. We've got stores and we'll be fine. Like, this is borne out by reality. So there we go. I'll stop now. But there's that in a summary for me is the state of play, I'd say.
Platform and digitize, or
cloud native
and
architecture.
cloud.
Data in the cloud, data layer across the business, integrate data to every part of your business and every process in sales and marketing, finance, operations, product development, customer experience. It's got to be embedded to everything, every end to end. That's what it's got to be done.
Right. Without it, we'll see. Keith, thank you, Alpesh. Keith, to you, same question. Resetting the table. Anything to add to Joanne or Alpesh's point, but resetting the table for you and what you focus on. Where is data and AI being applied or not?
I see the reset as applying to these old school industries. The data and the AI that interprets that data, I would say it's not even mature enough yet for a reset, because as Joanne and Alpesh just talked about, you know, implementation is still so thin and so immature. It's not there. There's still a lot of work to be done. If I could use an anecdote to explain the difference between anecdotal data and true data, I'll talk about one company, and Joanne's maybe inspired me here to talk about in the health space, a company that we were very keen on that had an implant for measuring intraocular eye pressure. Now, this is an indication of glaucoma, which can lead to blindness, is a real problem at end of life. And it actually is something that I am at risk for myself. So I know a lot about this. The way of measuring this right now, and maybe some people have had this, is they blow two little puffs at the eye, and it's just when you go in for your appointment, and usually you're like a little stressed because something's coming at your face. Oh my gosh! And so, you know, you're already stressed. It's not a normal environment, and they test it, and they're like, okay, great. And then maybe they test you 6 months or 6 years later, and then they have another data point. Now that's like anecdotal data where it's isolated. It's like, you know, the people who were, you know, convinced that the U.S. election was really stolen because only their small sample of people that they interacted with, right, that those people were sharing the same anecdote instead of the broad data. Now this company that we were so keen on, their implant was there and measuring constantly, always. And so you had this continual data, and that data is noisy, But actually within that noise, there are patterns and trends and things that AI can go in there and extract. And it's not just about the risk of glaucoma. You can see all kinds of other indicators as well. And that's moving from an anecdote to true data situation. And in fact, we don't even know the true value of what can come out of that data. What it was designed to measure, it does, but it's measuring lots of other things too. And that's very exciting.
Which is also goes to a story in the wearable space I remember hearing about as well with Microsoft and how they got into the space initially. And it was actually through some of the development of, I think, an actual wristband wearable device. There was a gentleman that was wearing it who was on the team and noticed some irregular data that was being shown. They thought the device was broken. They continued to analyze it and wear it, and it turned out that the gentleman had had a heart arrhythmia. And that this device showed, because of the data, that there was an actual issue. And to your point, these devices and trackers and things that we're seeing that are collecting data show not just their sole purpose, but much more as well from that. And that's just going to open up new doors as to Alpish's and Joanna's points around, this platform and the idea of digitizing, bring in the platform, and let's see what else can be built on top of it or found as well. And Nicole, I want to come to you to add on anything from the previous comments as well, but then also your thoughts around the reset of the table.
Yeah, I'm really also very excited about data and AI in the healthcare space. There's a company that we've invested in called Gray Matter Analytics that is providing analytics as a service. And what they're doing is they're collecting data so that the healthcare providing companies have a much better understanding of what the needs of their base is. And so consequently, they can provide things like value-based care. And, it's really a huge cost-saving exercise for the healthcare providers. And also it is really helping us to understand what are the true needs of the greater population. I mean, we've done a really poor job in public health that's been highlighted by the pandemic. And now we have this opportunity to use data, to use AI, and understand what's going on for greater, sets of the population. So that type of thing I'm really excited about. Other areas in AI that, we're just scraping the surface now in the marketing world, being able to better understand customers and the customer journey and intent and things like that. And so you're seeing that come in through a lot of the CRM tools and content tools that are out there in the world. And that's rather interesting to me. I always want to make sure that there's a really strong ethics side of it. And, this conversation wouldn't be appropriate, I think, if we didn't address ethics and AI and data and bias. And so I'm really, an advocate for making sure that, the tools and technologies are leveraged for, for better and not, in invasive or ways that can provide some sort of bias, like not offering specific products or services to people of different, genders or race, that sort of thing. So I'm really bullish as to what we're seeing and learning and how we're applying those learnings, and enjoying it.
Yeah, and a key word, aside from bias, because that's actually a very important topic we'll talk about here in just a moment, but the other key word that's kind of gone around the table here is learning. This is still in its earliest stages, even though we want it to be further ahead. And we've had artificial intelligence for a number of years in different stages, but really we're just coming to the beginnings of this learning on how to use the data and what data to be used and where our limits are. And that's going to continue to be pushed as we continue to develop new products and services as well. So I think that's a key word to take away. Now, bias, this is interesting. because bias can play many different areas, including geography as well, right? Not everyone is connected around the world on the internet, which is one very big bias. And then when they are connected, there's many more biases that will come into play as well. And so, Alpesh, starting off with you, I mean, you work with many companies, as you stated, on entering that data layer. How do you help them with beginning to think about or compensating for bias in those systems?
Well, bias is bias. It's a difficult question. I mean, I think it depends on the context. Depends on the context around bias, right? Are you talking about sexual bias? Are you talking about race? Are you talking about? I mean, it's a complex.
Just the beginning. Yeah, I mean, it is complex. It's a tough question.
So,
I'm throwing it to you.
So data ethics should be embedded as part of a governance model into your business, right? You can't assume everything's going to be fine. You have to embed. Unfortunately, everybody, if you talk to large companies, say data governance, and everybody hates data governance, unfortunately. But the reality is to enable the monitoring and resetting. Resetting is not the right word, but you get what I mean. And you have to provide data governance. You have to provide the ability to monitor these algorithms and say, are these doing things? And unfortunately, you can automate chunks of it, but at the end point, that if you're talking about racial bias, as a simple example, you probably would need at some point a human to intervene. So you can put in checks and balances into the algorithms to test those things. You can take samples and say, well, we did this model and we picked this audience. Can we check? And if you run the model over and over again, what's happening? So you can build in these kinds of checks and balances to see what the results are, and therefore iterate through the algorithm to try and modify that. So part of it is manual, a lot of it's automated, but a lot of it's to do with data governance and data ethics, and having clear data ethics on what you're talking about, making sure your clients know this is what we think. So that they're buying into your approach to data ethics, and then doing it and demonstrating to clients with transparency that you are doing it with tools and mechanisms, so they can adjust as they would like to do to get the value they want.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I'm seeing shaking heads. And Joanne, I'm going to come to you next on this. I mean, you're focused around healthcare as a bigger umbrella. I mean, bias, how is that playing a role? What are you seeing or hearing about how people are trying to adjust and learn into that behavior?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things, and I think healthcare is very personal to each individual, and this is something that has been, I think one of the things that the pandemic has highlighted is that there are ways that ethical frameworks can be built in that allows data to be collected and used for the right use case. And I think that's been so important because we have seen in the past some bad examples of this happening. And we've also seen some examples of it happening not deliberately, but it still actually has the same unfortunate output. And I think one of the big things that's happened, especially, so my area of expertise is in genetics and genomics and precision medicine as a whole. And one of the things that we've really seen develop over the last couple of years is that if you look at a patient population in isolation, you do get inherent biases unless there is a little bit of difference between the population. Genomics, unfortunately, captures a white middle-class group of individuals very often. How do we get better at either allowing this testing to be uniform or more available? Is that the problem, or is it that people don't want to have it done? And so there's a big education piece around healthcare as a whole, not just genomics, to actually allow us to look at the differences. There are differences in our bodies, whether it's man, whether it's woman, and whether it's a different ethnicity. If people metabolize drugs differently, we need to know that. Don't give me the same dose as someone who's twice my size if I'm not going to, maybe I metabolize it twice as fast, maybe I need triple the dose, or maybe it's a drug that I'm never going to actually respond to, so why would I get it? And maybe there's a particular group, an ethnic group that actually will never respond to that drug, so why would the drug be launched in that market to begin with? And I think this is why I'm so excited about this space now, is that all of that data has been collected for many, many years. Human beings just simply cannot churn through that fast enough to be able to start to make those insights. So the smart companies that are coming up with these algorithms, as we just heard about, the intraocular eye pressure, to actually see those different data points and come together and say, oh, we have noticed that this is actually what happens, I don't know, when people have a high salt diet, or maybe it actually happens in a particular group of individuals from particular countries. So what is it that we can actually start to see for insights? And I think if there's a clear ethical framework with the use case as to why this data is being generated and how it's going to be used, most people are quite happy with it. We're all very well aware that, the example I gave recently to someone about data access was, if you have an online consultation right now with your GP and you have a rash and they ask you to turn on your camera and you say no, how are they ever going to help you? It's more or less the same when it comes to data collection and genomics and everything. How can you see what's inside me if I don't share that with you? And I think we need to understand what that trusted relationship is and what that use case is. The same way I wouldn't want my GP to take a screenshot of my rash and send it around the internet. Of course, that's not going to happen. So what are the checks and measures that we can put in place to make people confident that the use case that they're consenting to is actually going to be the one it is, and that piece of data, so the rash doesn't have to be identified with me anymore, but maybe that photo can then be taken and looked at through a variety of different algorithms with hundreds of other photos to try to find that pattern. So someone realizes that the first time that someone sees this, they're realizing very quickly that it's a particular type of rash that needs a particular drug, as opposed to wondering, oh, I wonder what this is. I'll give them a couple of different creams and let's hope it's going to be fine. So I think the smartness of what can be built in is definitely there. It's just getting citizens to realize that the ethical frameworks and the use cases have to be exceptionally crystal clear. And to me, that's what's exciting, because we've got so many backlogs right now of different treatments that haven't been delivered correctly. A lot of things have been put on hold because of the pandemic. We've had to change the way patient pathways are now happening. So there's a huge space for us to actually get super creative and really and truly revolutionize healthcare.
That's a great point. I saw Keith, you shaking your head in agreement. Anything to add onto Joanne's point, or anything deeper you want to go on around both healthcare, but also climate and sustainability, and maybe even supply chains, as how again bias may be playing a role in those?
Sure. So 99% agreement, but and this is not even a disagreement, but there's a concern here that I have around very restrictive use cases on the data, because I believe I'm not. This is not belief. That's a word I'm trying to move beyond. I'm convinced that there is greater value lying within the data than what we think we're looking for, and that rash that got a picture taken care of. Picture taken of, that's terrible grammar. That itself might be useful for comparing its growth to last month or something like that. And if that was the only allowable use of the data, okay, that's a use of the data and that has some value. But maybe that rash is something that is appearing related to some environmental factor. And unless you're bringing enough data together and you have smart enough AI that doesn't know what it's looking for, it's just looking for signals. That's all it's looking for. And it will find a signal, and you could identify that, oh, this new shampoo that was introduced into the market that is only being used by, or predominantly being used by, a particular group of people from a particular background or culture, that is what is causing the rash. And unless you had a broad enough use case, you would never have enough data or the ability for the AI to dive into it and look for any damn signal it could find. Because we don't know what we don't know. And that's true of the entire universe, as well as it is of our own actions. Right? Even our own motivations, most of us don't know what really drives us. And unless we have the ability to dive into that data, we are going to be leaving money on the table. We're going to be just walking away from the value that can be created there. And yes, in the areas that I'm focusing on, I'm acquiring companies in supply chain, that is absolutely true. Most of these companies don't really know how they manage to keep everything flowing, get what they need, and get it to where it's going. They just focus on getting their little bit done and on time, and to collect their money and not have people upset with them, right? But actually, they could be doing so much more, and that's what I'm finding with these companies. Is often they have something that's far more valuable than the thing that they think they're selling. And so I would just advise in any situation, try to make the ability to analyze that data as broad as possible.
That's a good point. What industry, for each of you, what industry is most underutilizing the data that they may be collecting as well? And we'll stay away from healthcare as an umbrella, but maybe something specific within that, because healthcare is the easy one. But Elpish, I want to come to you. I mean, again, you're working with many companies. Where do you see the industry that's most underutilizing the data that they may have access to?
There's so many.
Pick five.
I would rather, oh God, real estate, manufacturing, financial services, where else? Automotive, apart from Tesla, because Tesla's just blown it away, I mean, it's like so far ahead. I think the better way to look at it is which companies have, so to demonstrate what, if you use data properly, what it can do, look at the digitally native companies. People don't like talking about them, but Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, these guys use the data so amazingly well. Most media companies are not using data. I mean, they're media businesses. You think they know how to use their data. The reality is they don't. So if you can see the guys that use data better and be able to and implement the operating models around leveraging of data, you can see them pull away. You can see the valuations pull away. You can see it. Yeah, you can see them pull away. Just look at those. And if you look at all the other ones, they're all the laggards that's just not fixing this stuff. It's obvious. I mean, fintech, just an example in fintech, right? You'd think that every fintech would use all of the data that they have. That's not what I've seen. That's not the experience I've had, I tell you. Right. Talking to some of these fintechs, you go, okay, what are you doing with your data? They go, oh, what do you mean? Like, well, we've got a website and we collect information about it. Okay, well, have you pulled your data together? No. Sorry? You're a fintech. That's the whole point.
But real quick, there is a side note to that. I'll jump in. And fintech is one of them, media is the second, is that there is still a level of trust, one. Two, there's also a level of desire as a consumer. So trust has been broken in some of those industries. And also there's a fear going back into trust as to how and where that data is being used. But these are good examples. And the media one is really good because there's great algorithms helping to serve us certain types of media that we may want to see over others, right? Again, look at Netflix as just a simple example and others. However, as consumers, to your point, Elvish, we actually want data to be used in a different way. We want more serving to us versus what we're currently getting. So in some cases, some of these companies, as consumers, we're actually wanting more than they're giving us right now, even though they're giving us a lot, to your point. And fintech, again, is one of those. Media is another. Manufacturing, I know Keith is going to have some more on it. So you've set the stage. You've reset the table, if you will, for us. And I appreciate that. Nicole, same question. Industries that you're seeing underserving the use of data right now?
Well, I sorry to go back a tiny bit, but I wanted to provide two film recommendations for listeners and viewers. One is, do you trust this computer? And it was done by Chris Payne, who's a longtime friend of mine. And he did the original film, Revenge. He did the electric car and Revenge of the Electric Vehicle film. And so he's always been an activist storyteller in his filmmaking. And Do You Trust This Computer is very interesting. It covers the topic of AI in all kinds of different industries and functions. And a big part of it is in government and defense, which is, not my favorite topic per se, but it's something that we really need to be aware of, where data is. The second film recommendation came out of Sundance last year, and I go to Sundance every year, and it's called Coded Bias. And that's also very interesting because it's all about who's behind the AI and who is coding, and how that does or doesn't factor in different groups. Like, they used an example of clearly some code that had bias because it wouldn't even recognize people with darker skin with the facial recognition software. So anyway, Do You Trust This Computer and Coded Bias are two film recommendations in the AI space and data space that I think are interesting for people, because they present both sides, all those amazing benefits that we can realize from the collective data, and then the challenging side of it, where there's issues of bias or not even actually being able to interpret the data. One area that I also really love is how the blockchain technology is being used for encrypting data. And so I've worked with a number of companies that pull data on and off the chain and are able to encrypt it in such a way and then put it back together in such a way that it really provides meaningful insights. So those are some areas where I'm excited.
I love it. I'm seeing shaking heads. Keith, a quick industry or two as we're coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to run over a minute or two here, but a quick industry or two that you're seeing as well.
Sure. Manufacturing, where data should be everywhere. We should have sensors everywhere throughout every manufacturing process and know what's going on. And yet, typically, you will see, like, you have a quality control inspection at the end, and maybe one at the beginning, and you may have no other data all the way along. Or maybe you have 2 or 3 points along the way, temperature to make sure you're smelting at the right temperature so that you get the right alloy or something like that. But otherwise, you have very little. And there's not much excuse for that right now, because sensors are, by and large, very cheap. Yes, there are some expensive sensors out there, but most sensors are really cheap and getting cheaper. And I know that because I've gotten excited about sensor companies and always been disappointed, and like, oh no, I just can't make the math work because the people won't pay for the product unless you can position it as a service. And that's a key part of our investment thesis. Service business model, absolutely. If you're just selling widgets, especially sensors, you just can't make money. But the data is at the heart of that service. And in manufacturing, this is absolutely true. If all you're doing is selling a temperature sensor, you're the same, or maybe you're 10% better or something like that than somebody else's temperature sensor, but it's just a temperature sensor. But if you're selling the ability to increase productivity by 10%, now that has a lot of value, and you can position a service to do that, where you get to capture a significant portion of the increased profitability for your customer.
Thank you, Keith. Joanne, to you, but a little bit different of a question. Femtech, you mentioned this in the beginning. This is an area that you invest in. Personally, I think that it's definitely underutilizing the data that it can be or has been collected. Any thoughts around that from your perspective, looking at that industry?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things, so just tapping on to what other folks were saying, the biggest thing we don't actually take advantage of is each one of us as a citizen is a patient in some way, shape, or form. We've got a lot of information. Why don't we extrapolate that better and share it and use it more efficiently? And this is actually one of the reasons why Femtech is so interesting to me. Again, looking across the patch, it's not too different from genomics. The people who are selected for clinical trials, almost all of the drug testing historically has been done on a white male who's 70 kilos. Well, unfortunately, the last time I looked in the mirror, or maybe fortunately, that's not me. So how do we start getting women? And the thing is, women are difficult. And it's difficult because we actually have a menstrual cycle, and therefore that screws up a clinical trial. So don't just exclude that, use that to your advantage so that the actual metabolic processes in our bodies are taken into consideration so that we can actually process the drugs more efficiently. So rather than saying, oh, we can't give it to these group of individuals, well, you can actually increase your market size by actually bringing in people who are have the right chemistry, if you will, to be able to look at those products. So I personally think that we haven't advanced on the amount of women's health as much as we should have, mostly just because it's been difficult to deal with. So rather than it being difficult and just kind of put into a box as it's too difficult to deal with today, use it to your advantage. There's loads of new products that can be developed, loads of different drugs that can be developed for appropriate conditions rather than just a blanket approach. So I'm so excited by this space, not because I'm a woman, but mostly because I can see it as massive amounts of data that's been generated for years that hasn't been used. And obviously more tailored approaches to healthcare is something that really excites me. Absolutely. Thank you, Joanne. And where can everyone find you to continue the conversation as well as we've reached the top of the hour? Yeah, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Twitter tag is Joanne Hackett00. Wonderful. Thank you. Keith, same question. Where can everyone find you?
Great. Find me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Twitter at Keith A. Gillard, or my stealthy website is upperstage.ventures.
It's a beautiful stealth website. To everyone who hasn't seen it yet, it's wonderful. Take 2 seconds out of your day and have a little joy.
That's all we'll
to you. There you go. Elfish to you. Where can everyone find you online?
Use similar to the guys on LinkedIn, Alpesh Doshi. When you send a message, let me know where you saw me, heard me. That'll be really useful. My Twitter handle is @Alpesh Doshi. I was lucky. I was on Twitter in 2008, so I got my name. And yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. Close us out. Where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Nicole DeMeo, or my firm Outfront Solutions, or How Women Invest. And my Twitter handle is TechieCat, because I love it.
Love it, love it, love it. Elfish, Nicole, Keith, Joanne, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights and helping to reset the table around business and data along with artificial intelligence. A lot more to be had around this conversation as we'll continue this conversation here on VCTV in a number of different ways over the next few weeks. To your audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, share, check out the archive on VCTV at LATOKEN.com to hear from all of our speakers and the entire global VCTV family. A big thank you to our team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find me along with all of our guests today and the team online on social media everywhere. And as Elfish said, reach out and make sure you add context when you do, so we know where you saw us, where you heard us, and what you want to continue the conversation about. With that, we'll be back here tomorrow with more VCTV. Speak to everybody soon. Have a great day.